Hello and welcome to the Bricecast, episode 6. My name is Bryce. If you're joining me here, appreciate all the love and support. Mad amounts of you are downloading the podcast, which is something I didn't expect to see. More of downloading the podcast than watching it on Twitter. By the way, just realised I left the alerts live. That's Maven if you heard it. But joining me here, a genius, an incredibly smart Call of Duty brain, and I've always appreciated him, and I love the fact that, everybody else is now doing the same thing. It's Chance. Chance, how are you?
Doing all right, man. How are you? And I always appreciate the kind words, even if like half of them are unjustified. But I appreciate the gas pricey, and I love talking COD with you. So I'm sure it'll be a good time.
Awesome. Well, we've got a lot to talk about today. I don't even know where to begin because I was going to start talking about champs and everything that goes on because obviously it was a great event in my mind. There was some great Call of Duty and the storylines were fantastic, but I feel like there's an elephant in the room that we just have to get straight on with, right? We just have to talk about Jkap has now officially retired, and that happened literally minutes ago. So you're seeing this here. It's just fresh news. Chance, what's your initial thoughts on it? Because he's just put it out there.
With like 2 minutes to think about it, I just want to I pay respects to the legend, right? Like I went briefly back through his career and looking over COD Gamepedia and like how many, like 10, 12, 15 championships, something like that, 2 world championships. He has accomplished more than not just like 99.9% of Call of Duty players in general, but even like competitive Call of Duty players. He's accomplished more than anyone could ask for. Literally, you just have the tagline, 2-time world champ retires, and the headline should tell you all that you need to know, right? Legend of the scene. At one point, I think like Black Ops 1, he was like the best player in the game. And to be able to hold the title of best Call of Duty player in the world ever when there's however many hundreds of millions of people that have played this game, it's incredibly impressive. And obviously, you got to pay your respects and be sad to see him go.
Yeah, I genuinely couldn't agree more. I think you've summed it up there correctly. He is a mainstay of Call of Duty Esports throughout its entirety, and has been here throughout the entire time. I feel like people overlook the accomplishment of getting 2 rings, even getting 1 ring. Right, puts you into a legend bracket. I know Call of Duty, right? It does, right? Like
yeah, it really does. Yeah,
Everybody knows the ring holders. It's even though, as Call of Duty, we put more emphasis on that one title than anything else. It's always, the best gameplay. Everyone practices like mental for it. We all hold it in high esteem. He's got 2 of them. No matter what else, can never take that away. Right? That's Hall of Fame instantly for me. Right? It has to be. And that's without the rest of his achievements. Something I thought about as we were going live, actually, which I think is kind of an interesting point, is when a player like JKap retires, the conversation on him changes immediately. Because when you talk, if we were talking about him in the current context and his prospects for next year and stuff, obviously you'd have to kind of figure out where he would sit in the tier list. But when you retire, we now look at it as a collective body of work. His collective career, his impact on the scene, his accomplishments, who he's played with, and how he's performed. And when you look at it like a collective, and because it becomes that entire body, and his history is now more relevant to the present than ever. It's genuinely incredible, and you got to, because I know it's one of these things on the Reddit. People have shit on him in recent times for not being good enough, but the truth is he is one of the best of all time, and you can't really denounce it. Like, regardless of what you think of his KD ratio and all that other shit, this guy knows what it takes to win. He always has done. Like I said, you don't you don't know how difficult it is probably to be at that level for that long. It's crazy to me.
I mean, I was even going to say earlier, like you were talking about how difficult it is to win like a world championship and like how impressive that is. Like, bro, it's incredibly difficult to win a single championship for anything. Like even like local lands, obviously that's super low tier, but like those can be difficult to win. And he's winning chips all the way back, starting in like Modern Warfare 3 era. Like he's been around for a literal decade. And since he came on, like he has been towards the top. He's been able to stay at a professional level at anything is an impressive accomplishment. And he just has so many accolades, so many different teammates that have come out and like sort of paid their respects and be like, JK, like he is a true legend of the scene. Anyone who's a fan of competitive Call of Duty, unless they picked up in the past like 3 months are going to know who the man is. And like, he's also been a guy who's been able to set himself, at least I would expect, in a way that he has a couple different avenues of how he can like sort of tailor like the next step in his career because of how effective he has been throughout his time. Like, he could go into a coaching role. He could potentially be talent. He has a whole host of options available to him.
Yeah, I'm super curious to see what he does next because I don't think Jkap is one of these players who will fail moving forward. Don't get me wrong, when some players retire, they're going to do the content role. They don't do a ton. Like, it's not going to be as big of an impact. I fully believe Jkap, when retired, is going to go on and do something great, right? If he goes into talent, he'll boss it, right? He'll be a great analyst. If he goes into coaching, same thing. He's always been known as a very cerebral player anyway. He knows the game inside and out. He knows what he's supposed to be doing. And I think his mannerisms, at least when I've spoken to him, I think he can at least break things down in a cohesive way to be an asset to a franchise, right? I think he is an asset used in that regards. There are many, many things. I don't know if content's going to be the way forward for him. He'll probably try a bit of streaming here and there now he's retired, and he's probably got that in his mind. I don't know how much, content he's been willing to do over time. It's not seemed something like he's been particularly interested in so far, but it wouldn't surprise me, once you got that kind of that weight lifted off your shoulders. I'm sure he's looking at it now thinking, for the first time in, best part of a decade, I don't have to worry about the stress of inter-team politics or roster mania or any of this shit, getting the next game early and worrying about my last year. Doesn't have to do any of that. Full change for him. It's waking up to a completely different environment than the one you went to bed in.
Agreed. And I mean, it might also be a thing where like he's set something up and he's probably been working on something for months now to try to approach that next step. Like, I don't imagine him to be the guy that when he gets dropped off of the team, of him not just working as hard as possible to figure out what that next step is going to be, or maybe he hit a wall and just decided to hang up the sticks and try to move forward from here. But agreed. I expect good things from him going forward. Nothing but positive things to say. And again, you just have to tip the cap to like genuinely one of the most accomplished Call of Duty players of all time.
Yeah, one of the most accomplished, and from what I can say, genuinely a nice guy as well. I've never had any issues with Jkap in my years of knowing him. To be fair, like I don't even remember hearing a lot of issues. Like you hear all this stuff, players argue and bicker and stuff. I don't really hear a lot, which says an awful lot for your character to kind of rise above that, I think. Like, I can't remember the last time there was genuinely beef for them. I'm sure somebody in the chat could tell me, exactly what happened here. But it's crazy, man. By the way, I did work out something earlier. If you have a world championship ring at the moment, it just seems like chaos. It's just, if you have a world championship ring, shit's gonna happen with you. It's drama.
Yeah.
The more rings you have, the worse it gets as well. Jesus. But that's by the way, that's 5 rings retired this year so far.
Oh yeah, retired. Okay, there you go. I was thinking just that like retired or got moved from a roster because that ring count jumps up to what, like 8 of just off of who's getting shifted around in some capacity. Yeah, it's Modern Warfare is a dagger year, I'd say, for a lot of people, and honestly, with at minimum 12 new people that are, or not new people, but people getting kicked out in some capacity or moved around a little bit, like it's been a tough time for a lot of Call of Duty players.
It has. Let's pay our respects to Cap, and I'm sure we'll touch on it again later in the episode. But I think we have to cover the World Championship first, because a lot of the news and stuff we have to talk about stems from that one event, right? That is what kicked off this whole crazy event and everything that happens, right? So the World Championship, obviously it was great. It was 4 teams going into it. Chance, you were actually, and I don't know how many people knew this, I saw it on Twitter, but I don't see you crow about it too much, the only person who predicted the top 4 at the end of the season.
Wait, what do you mean? Like like from the start of the year, I predicted the top 4?
So. I can't believe I remember where I saw it. I think it was the start of the year. You picked London,
Dallas,
Chicago.
I fucking did. You're right. I forgot about that. Dude, I'm a genius. I forgot about the London pick. When did I do it? Was that like January?
It was a long time ago, but I saw it come up.
Oh, dude, I gotta find this email actually. Sorry, not to distract. I forgot about that. Yeah, because like, okay, so obviously the first 3 are obvious, right? Like from the start of the year, everyone knew like the roster gets designed and everyone's looking at like Chicago and FaZe and be like, that's terrifying. And then depending on how Shotzzy pans out, that is also a terrifying roster. But like that London sleeper pick, like I should be proud of that one. I completely forgot that happened at the start of the year. I'm genuinely gonna find this email real quick because I'm just happy.
I saw it come out. I was like, wow, that is a pick. Like, I think a lot of other people picked Seattle, I believe was the pick, which they couldn't have been more wrong. It was an obvious one because of the talent of the roster, but that obviously, collapsed into ridiculousness. Yeah. I saw that's like, I can't believe Chance has managed to get this completely right and pick the top 4 at the end of the year, which is, by the way, just for clarification here, if you're watching Ganar, you said it was easy. I don't think it's easy at all, right? It's an unknown quantity.
So
right?
again,
on a meta you don't know with any kind of roster changes. It's a mad pick.
Well, okay, so I'll say the first 3 were like sort of easy because at least 90% of the community is going to have those towards the top. Obviously, like Seattle is a team that shook things up. And granted, there's a high degree of luck for this with the London pick too, because right at the start of the year, you got rated on the team.
Yeah.
Zero is not there. He's over towards, you got Juro on the squad. So it's not like the way I predicted it panned out. It had to have some craziness like throughout, but like, I can't believe you like even caught that. That is insane, Brycey.
Hey, I've got to do something right while I'm sitting here. I've got to catch this stuff. But no, it is interesting. Let's talk about it then, because they made the top 4.
I found the email, by the way. I had Ravens above Empire. So, like, as good as the top 4 prediction were, clearly got a couple things backwards. But
didn't need to mention that. You could have just said, no, I got it perfectly right.
Wishful thinking on my part.
So let's talk about that then, because obviously the Ravens thing was a surprise to a lot of people. Them kind of coming up from where they were mid-table to push it towards the end. And I got to say this, right? Full credit to Shawnee and Trey. Because I think they made the difference. Like, Trey was having a ridiculous couple of events.
No, I'd agree. Like maybe not even a sleeper pick, because I think if anyone like talked about the roster, he would have been like that guy on the team, at least like around champs time. But Shawnee to me was more impressive because like I'm to the point with Zero where I almost expect these sorts of things. Like, I think a lot of the times he needs to be that guy on the roster type deal. But Shawnee, it's like, you're expecting him to be the flex, fill in whatever role like necessary. And it just turned out, especially in that series against Toronto, the role he needed to fill was to be like a god among men on the map. And like, we always had the jokes about like construction man Shawnee, but he had like a full series where he just fried. And I think honestly, like he could honestly like screenshot the scoreboard he had on the St. Petro hardpoint against Toronto and just leave that like as his banner. Like, that should be the stock that he uses going to the next season of like, this is what he is capable of doing. 10 plus kills more than anyone else in the lobby, most time on the hill, had the clutch plays towards the end to seal the deals on rotation. Like, he genuinely is a player, like, I mean, at least since World War II, in my mind, that has always been a perfect guy of like, he's a sleeper pick. He's going to be a very good Call of Duty player as a standard across the board. And then occasionally he can also flip that switch and like make sure that he can push his team over the edge type thing.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. I think for me, those two especially, it takes, because the rest of the team are the rest of the team, a known quantity. People have said about Dylan not performing to his usual standards. I think it's probably just the change in the game and stuff, and I'm sure we'll see him, again. But I think Shawnee, for a start, right, stock wasn't massively high coming into the year. It was okay, right? It was okay, and he went onto the sub of the Ravens. I don't think anyone complained about it. Like, yeah, Shawnee's there. They don't know where he's going to fit in. So his stock, he's one of these players that stock has gone up because of his performance right then. He's just got an uptick towards the end, and it's kind of a similar story for Trey. He got dropped from New York. People were not sure if that was the right move. And obviously, like, I spoke to Trey, and he said to me, look, I just wanted to play. I needed to play. I'm not sitting out. I'm not doing all this. So I think he jumped at the opportunity to get onto the Ravens. I don't think he took anywhere near the contract he was probably on for New York originally. So he's just gone, I need to get in and get playing. And you know what, right? That, as far as I can tell, and it's only a snapshot of what of briefly speaking to him because he was busy, but he didn't want to play Warzone. He didn't want to play nothing. He was like, I am playing COD. That's it. I need to make a name for myself, or I'm screwed for next year. If they flop champs, we are screwed. And he didn't. He was playing so well.
I mean, agreed. Like that. I mean, honestly, it's one of the biggest factors because I think you probably heard Crim6 like mention the same thing on the podcast of just like the players have known for like roughly a month that like the switch to 4v4 is going to be coming. And if anyone needed any ass kicking to like get into gear, get ready for practice, to go to the absolute like grind for champs, like it is not just the prize pool that we had. It is legitimately like we've already seen from JKap, like players are now retiring. Like it is 4v4, minimum 12 people are going to effectively lose their like starting positions. It is going to be that much more difficult. The players that are now getting knocked into the challenger side of things, already challengers, not counting Australia, was hyper competitive. And like now that just gets like added, like we are definitely to the point, I think, in COD where this has, well, it is just the most difficult year to really be able to break through and stay at the top. It's just difficult. So Trey 100% made the right call of like, no war zone for me, man. Like last ditch effort, I need a good run, and he accomplished that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know who's going to stay on the Ravens because we'll get to this. We'll get to the Ravens threw a spanner in the works the last few days as well, but we'll get to that. Going up against Chicago, I don't think anyone really had London taking it. There was always, I mean, the European, hope, the optimism going, oh, they could win this, the top four. But Chicago looked. Oh, I want to say that those three teams seem to be a consistent cut above the rest of the teams in the league this year. Even if they had a bad event or they lost to somebody, you'd always expect them to push forward again. Like you'd always expect them to be like Atlanta FaZe, DallasEmpire, Chicago Huntsmen. Teams were too talented and too stacked to ever really not make it count at something like champs.
No, agreed. I mean, I think even like the switch from land online, a lot of the results were like pretty similar. Like there's a couple players, maybe a few teams that had like a sort of a shift one way or the other. But the Ravens were honestly a team pretty much the entire year where like if you go back and look at their record, they beat the teams they were supposed to beat. They lost the teams they were supposed to like lose to, like the Chicago, Atlanta, Dallas. Their records against the rest of the league combined is ridiculous. Like they were pretty much only losing to each other with like a couple hiccups like here and there, but it was a very almost like consistent year for the Ravens specifically, and for a couple teams like as a whole. And I think you're right. Like again, that's what I'm saying. Like before, of like the top four prediction, I don't think was actually that difficult for at least three of them, just because of how stacked those three rosters were. You're going to get a guaranteed level of production out of pretty much every single player on those top three teams. And again, the biggest question mark we had on those top three teams was Shotzi, and how is he going to perform? And it turns out he might be the best one of all of them. So it's just, yeah, I mean, even going towards next year, I have to imagine like those will still be the three teams, at least off the rip. Everyone's expecting to be the gods still.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's interesting between those final three teams. We'll move on to Chicago now, who obviously beat London in their first game to put them top three. Chicago is so difficult for me to kind of quantify in my mind where they are, because for a little while, I just no longer believe they could win it. Like there was as soon as I started watching some of the later events, I'm sitting there going, I don't think this team has it in them to win the World Championship. I don't think they have the. See, this is the bit I get confused with. I don't know if it's obviously they have the talent. They should know what they're doing. Like they have coaching. They know exactly. There's champions in that squad. But there was something I couldn't put my finger on, and I don't know exactly what it was. But I lost a little bit of faith in the Huntsmen. Maybe just consistency. Maybe it's their ability against the elite teams. But the whole thing, it didn't surprise me the fact that they lost to FaZe. It didn't surprise me that they beat London. That's exactly where I would put them. I would pick those same results pretty much every single time.
I'd say I agree with that. It's like dude, it's like Optic Gaming when it was like especially the T2P throughout their entire run. I think the majority of my thought process was like they're going to dominate in the respawns, and there's not really like no one can really say anything to them. Like there's always like one team that could go toe to toe, and whenever that happened, that was the team that beat them. And then their S&D was always like inconsistent. This is the first year where mainly for like the Scump and Formal, of course, the old Optic Gaming roster, where like flip flop to where now their S&D was super clutch and they were very clean in that game mode. They were always making the big plays in a very well-oiled machine. But then it was like the respawns that were a little bit more inconsistent. And I think, especially against the Londons, like anyone that just couldn't go toe to toe in like raw skill,
Yeah.
I think that like Huntsman, I'd pick them almost every time because, like, well, the respawn, you're never going to bully them. Even if they're inconsistent, they're never going to lose like two respawns. That would be a very bad series for them. And there's only a few teams that could like force that to happen. But then you get to the Atlantas and DallasEmpire, and like their best game mode was S&D. So I took Huntsman as a team that is phenomenal S&D, a little bit inconsistent at the respawns, but that like formula is good enough to beat everybody except the teams that can like take you down in the searches as well. So I agree. I think third is like right where almost they would have been expected to be towards the end. But obviously, it's also another one of those things where they're also a team capable of just completely turning up, turning into a devastating threat. And if they just like catch that fire, then they're one of the very few teams that would be legitimately unstoppable at times.
Yeah, it still bothers me because there's so much talent in that squad, right? And then they've got Gunners as a sub, obviously, ended up going into that sub bench halfway through, and I don't know. I just felt like I don't know how to quantify it, right? It's almost an intangible, and I don't know why. Maybe it's just having watched Call of Duty for so long, I could kind of tell, like against elite. And I think you're right. I think it's. I would even go so far as to say, because I believe Krim said something like this, and it makes a lot of sense. Like they are an incredibly mechanically gifted team. I just don't think that they're maybe either suit the game or while they can outskill players and go toe to toe in that buzzsaw of like hard points and respawns and everything like that. I think that there are other teams who maybe play the game slightly more textbook in the way that they conduct the way they want to play, if that makes sense. Like the strategies are more locked in, they're a little bit tighter, they know exactly how to go down, and that's not, and that's something that Optic Gaming, I felt like maybe that was the edge. Maybe that's just a little bit of difference. If they could just obviously be gunning, doing mad things, but also consistent and just have their shit together. You're right. I think they could have beaten anybody, but there was no part of me that was super confident they were going to be able to beat Dallas and Atlanta during that event.
Yeah, they weren't a team for me that I think, like, I never watched their gameplay and I was like, they play this game better than everyone else. Like, they never showed me anything on the map where I was like, they have that something extra. They have like these weird strats. And there was even some teams toward the bottom of the league. Like, even when Optic LA was like getting bodied like across the board, there was still like certain maps they'd have on like an Arklov Peak S&D where I was like, all right, like there's something here. Like they might be losing, but there's like a certain degree of creativity and ability to make these like on the fly adjustments that like if they can find it, they can start bringing it together and make a run. In Huntsman, I think from top to bottom, like they were always a great team, but they never showed me like that little something extra, not that extra sauce. And like I'm sure we'll get to with the Empire, but like what do we see from them in the grand finals or even before that when they're playing phase? You have Clayster showing off new wall bang spots on Ramaza. You have weird rotations coming on a Zir cave that pay off beautifully. You have Illy pulling out weird sniper angles on Gunrunner, and like they had all that little something extra that for all the game fives, all the round 11s, all of the hard points within 10 points that we've had this year, Huntsmen were a team to me that like they never had enough to make me say, all right, when it comes down to the wire, they'll have that something extra. It was very much either they're on and they're going to destroy everybody, or they're going to be normal and then they'll lose to the top teams and beat everybody else. And
Yeah.
they didn't have that extra sauce.
No, I agree. I think for me, Chicago Huntsmen are up there in the elite teams. I think they could go against anybody, and you are right saying they have to be on that full buzzsaw, top of their playing ability, going off mode to take them. But it's possible. Whereas I feel like the others are more consistent and be able to deliver that high performance. And as soon as they come against that, that's when they start to struggle because they're like, shit, we just can't outslay them like lunatics.
Like, and for what it's worth, I do think this is like somewhat of an overblown narrative of like the guys are just like slay heavy and they don't know how to play.
Yeah.
I think even like tit for tat, like they knew the game as well as anybody else. Again, just outside of that extra 1 or 2% type deal, like it may very well be a situation where we go to Cold War and now instead of like it being incredibly difficult to like have blowout games in hardpoint, just because like if team A wins a rotation, they're going to lose the next tilt type deal, and you have to like really work the nitty gritty to get any extra points. And sometimes the spawns just, screw you over anyway. I wouldn't be surprised if we go in a new year with 4v4 where these players like have the opportunity to just erase that narrative and to play the game as well as they did this year. And if the game is just more well suited to them, then they might be at the top of the game the entire year. Like I don't want to make any super hardcore reads, at least in a negative direction, just because of how like particular this game was. So I'm just saying I don't want to bury the narrative of just like slay heavy but brainless type deal. Like they were still a very intelligent team. Like Envoy has to be one of the smartest players we have in the league at this point. Like he is a wizard on the map at times of just his ability to put himself completely in the mix, in between all 10 players on the lobby, and finding a way to get entry kills or whatever it's going to be. Like, they still had a high degree of intelligence, just not to the same degree that like the Dallas Empire basically had. Like, literally just the Empire that had that little something extra.
Yeah, no, I can agree with that. Let's talk about Huntsman then versus Atlanta FaZe. Because I thought if they're going to make a run here, like the London game for me was the obvious one. I was like, yeah, I can see Chicago beating London 9 times out of 10. I was like, this is where I find out if Chicago have come to play at the World Championship. Like, are they going to be that team that can take the world? And against Atlanta FaZe, I didn't see it either. Like, it just seemed like I wasn't surprised by that result, and I don't think anybody really was. I was slightly worried whether Atlanta FaZe would tilt and go off and worry about, after taking a loss to Dallas. But I don't think anybody really predicted. And here's the thing, right? So I did a podcast before this, and we had Methods, we had Silly, and we had Marky B. They basically all predicted Chicago to lose that game. All of them. There wasn't really a dissent there. Even when I think Marky thought Dallas would win it, and I think the other two thought Atlanta would be the ones who, went through into the grand final. But nobody had faith in Chicago Huntsmen beating any of these two teams. And Atlanta FaZe, right? Like, it's scary how talented that team is, because I think some people were worried, right? And it wasn't a lot of people. It wasn't like a big narrative. It wasn't one of these things where people were going, they're still rookies. It could have been a fluke. I think enough people realized, like people like Simp were like, no, he's the real deal straight away. There is even, he won it. He got the MVP at World Championship last year. Coming into this year, we know he's still good. We know he is tip top, right? And Atlanta FaZe, when they came into this year, everybody was like, yeah, they're good. Just to make sure, and I feel like there's a half-second pause going, just to make sure they're good at the first event. No, they're good. It's fine. It's absolutely fine now, because nobody wanted to be wrong in that regard. And Atlanta FaZe, they kept it up all year. It was one of these ones where I was sitting there going, yep, the real deal. These guys are going to be they might already be there. In 5 years, depending on how the rest of their career goes, already made massive names for themselves.
Yeah, the FaZe guys are disgusting. If anyone has the argument that any player on that team, including Major Maniac, who I assume, at least on like Twitter, still gets flack in his mentions for like low productivity, they're all phenomenal players. And like even going to the grand finals, I was expecting them to win, even being down a map. And just to backtrack into Chicago Huntsmen, even against FaZe, and I am cheating because I did have to look this up, but like one of the series they had that they got beat 3-1, the domination was still a 20-point game. The hard point they lost at the end was an 11-point game. Like, it still came down to the absolute wire. I think that was when Celium had to fry inside a restaurant and go on like the 7 spree. I think that was against the Huntsmen. So they're all super tight games. The game 5 they lost before, they lost in a game 5 round 10. Right in the S&D that they lost in the series. After that, it went to around 11. And that's why I was going with the tagline of like their S&D has been like their saving grace. It's been the main reason they've been able to beat all the teams that were beneath them. But once it comes to the Empire and once it comes to FaZe, that is toe-to-toe in the search and destroy. That is whoever clutches up in the round 11. And like, if that's not Chicago, their saving grace no longer exists. And then they're going to fall out of the tournament. And the FaZe is just a team that obviously we saw it, 2v4s, whoever it's going to be. Anyone that's alive on that team in whatever situation, there's still hope that they can clutch the round. And like, it's just that they had that extra amount of talent that they can make up for that in at least the search and destroys.
No, I agree. I think a lot of people, at least with Atlanta FaZe, right? Everybody, and it's kind of something that you realize when you've watched enough events. Winners final, always the best game. Always the best game. We all know it is. Grand final's obviously the big one because you get a champion at the end of it and the prize money and everything. But the truth is, right, if you watch enough of these tournaments, you know that most finals don't live up to that hype. They don't. It's the truth, because the winners final and obviously momentum and the morale and all this shit. And don't get me wrong, someone in the chat will put, what about the massive comeback at this event? I was like, those are exceptions. Trust me, the rule by and large is that the finals are worse than the winners final, because those two teams who have not been beaten yet in this event are going to go at it hard. And whoever comes in has the mental advantage to come back. It's a big thing. But yeah, so I thought the Atlanta Dallas game. So originally, when I was predicting this beforehand, I was kind of leaning on Dallas, and I actually got convinced out of Dallas by Marky B, who picked Dallas because I disagreed with his points. Um, he was saying for some reason I kind of felt more strongly about Atlanta FaZe and the respawns, but it turns out that I was wrong in that regard. And the Dallas Empire just seemed to play they look so well prepared. I think that's what speaking about the game versus Atlanta FaZe, we knew they had to basically keep a lid on like Simp and all that. They just had to lock them down and Abizi and that kind of pressure. And they showed that is exactly what Chicago failed to do. And Dallas, basically, from what I can tell, game planned it. They weren't shook. They didn't care. They had their rotations unlocked. They knew their setups, and they were just ready to go to war. Dallas, Krim said it, but he is right. And if you look at it objectively after the event, you would say Dallas looked better prepared.
No, absolutely. I think honestly, maybe I should have done this and like gotten some tweets out type deal to like try to get some engagements, but like they came into playoff/champs having never won a single Azir Cave hardpoint, literally the entire year. And granted, a lot of those are close maps, but they're losing to teams across the board, good teams, bad teams. It doesn't matter. They literally were 0-6, I think it was, on Azir Cave, and then they don't lose it a single time throughout playoffs and champs. And like, I genuinely think I think it took like the first 3 maps we saw the grand finals, and I was like, oh, Empire knew they were winning this tournament the entire time. Like I saw that and I was like, not a doubt in my mind. They could have lost the game 5 to FaZe in the winner's semifinals, whatever it was. I still think that team would have come through the loser's bracket and beaten FaZe in the finals. Like they looked way too good. They went again 0-6 on Azir Cave to going against FaZe, where Simp has the number 1 and number 2 kill record on that map, and just beat the snot out of them. Like wasn't even close. Like literally the first 3 maps we had in the grand finals in the head-to-head, since FaZe and Empire played each other, I think 3 times, 1-7 in map count on the first 3 maps in the series. They beat the piss out of them on all 3. Ailey's pulling out stuff on the gunner S&D when they hadn't beaten FaZe before. Like I think the Empire had the week or whatever it was that they knew in advance they were playing FaZe to prepare, and they went to the grindstone. It was like, here's everything we're going to do in every single situation. Here's the rotations we have on Cave. Here's the new plant spot that FaZe is not going to be prepared for in the slightest. Here's what we can do on our Mazda. Yeah. Like, I think genuinely, if you went into like it asked FaZe and polled the players, they'd be like, I'm very confident we're going to win the series. We're winning champs. If you asked Empire, they'd laugh. They'd be like, bro, like you guys will see. Don't worry about it. We're going to just body them. And they don't know what's coming. Like Empire, they were too far ahead of the game. And they were in Texas, which helps. But mainly the first thing.
Yeah, to just bring that up, didn't you? I think like watching that first winners final, I was like, it could be 50-50, it could go either way. And even after it went down and FaZe went down, I went, oh, it could be a really good final. It'll be one of these ones where FaZe are revved up. It's a new day. They know they just have to come back from this 1-0 deficit. And the 1-0 deficit didn't really look like a lot. You're sitting there going, it's a map. It's a map. And then we watched the final start. And you watched Dallas Empire just go to work. And I was sitting there going, what the fuck is wrong with FaZe? Like, what is wrong with FaZe? Somebody tell me what's gone on. Because this does not look like a team in contention for the World Championship. This looks like a league match at the start of the season. It just doesn't mean anything. And then they kept going down, and even after the FaZe won that solitary map, I'm sitting there going, just don't think they're going to win 5. I just don't see it. It's a best of 9. And you couldn't convince me after the going down. I think I can't remember if they went down 3-0 or 4-0. I think it was 3-0. Like you couldn't convince me at that point that Dallas didn't have the engine in them to just take maps. I thought it was just over. At that point, it's like, oh god, it's over. I had memes ready. I had tweets. It was just like, oh crap, yeah. this series is over.
It was 4-0 for what it's worth, and then like FaZe won like the gun on her hard point before losing like the next map. But I'm sure you know this. There was like a delay from when we were actually like doing the show to when it was getting pushed out. So like everything was done live effectively, but like everyone had to save their tweets for 30 minutes to an hour, hour and a half, whatever it's going to be. When the stream or the matches started for the grand finals, it was right after Empire finished going up 4-0 and going into the 5th map. And all of us were like, dude, this like sucks. Like this is over before it started. Like we were going to like rewatch the broadcast or like watch it live and get the tweets ready and all of that. And we were almost demoralized because we were like, dude, that was just like, it wasn't even close. Like they just beat the snot out of them. Like this is GG and it's over before like really it's begun for anybody else. And like it was hard. But then, FaZe clutched up the hard point and made it like a little bit more interesting. But there was definitely that vibe for us as well of just like, I can't believe just how dominant like that actually was for a champs grand finals for two teams that literally just finished going game 5, for how competitive every team was the entire year. And Empire were just like, no, no, no. Like, we're good. We got this. This is our bag. Like, it's fine.
That team definitely had more confidence in themselves than I think a lot of people did. Just going into champs, like people were like, I even saw people think, Chicago, Dallas was going to lose the first one, then Chicago would beat them, and it's like it's not even going to be like funny. Obviously Krim and Clay were super emotional at the end, and you saw it. They knew it was a big thing for their legacy. And obviously, we've got to talk more about the trick plays and all that sort of shit they pulled out, because it's been a while since I've seen that. It doesn't happen as often as people think it would do, that teams hold shit back to win stuff at champs. Because usually the games are really, really close, and you don't want to go out before then. So it's so rare that I've seen a team hold shit back. Like the look in the gone.
I was gonna say this exact thing I've been trying to talk about for like half the year. Of like, I can't outright say it on broadcast of like, yo, this home series doesn't mean a thing for like Dallas or whoever. It's like, hey, they care about the seating, like it's nice, the money, but like realistically, and I think FaZe is the primary example of when they started losing at the midway point, I saw fans be like, what is this? What is this FaZe? Like, they're not good. They need to get back on. Like, people are playing Warzone and like freaking out. And the entire time I'm like, guys, like, it's fine. They have locked up the #1 seed. It doesn't matter. Like, you need this team to be good at champs. And the same thing can be said for the Empire of like, oh, they ended up in the 3rd, 4th seed. It's not as good as 1, 2. It doesn't matter. There is one tournament after you get to whatever point threshold to be, especially in the top 4. And as long as you get that, you're safe and secure. And as soon as you hit that mark, which many of these teams did, again, roughly at the halfway point of the year, it doesn't matter. You do not need to go full force anymore. Now your entire focus needs to be on figuring out how to beat teams X, Y, and Z that you're playing against the champs. And that's it. You have like 3 or 4 months to figure that portion out. Nothing else really matters to you.
Yeah, I mean,
so I think in the same vein, basically.
We'll come back to this in just a second, but I've just seen something in the chat. I'm going to call you out, right? Somebody said the finals were such a blowout because the format was god awful. Do you like that's just to put this clear?
Wholeheartedly disagree.
Just to put this clear, right? The format for the grand finals, if it was the old format, which would have been 2 best of 5s, then Dallas would have won it in less maps. They would have won it in a lot less maps. And you're saying the veto stacked it. Vetoes are something that coaches work on and the team work on. It's map pool and strategy. Don't talk to me about vetoes being so much in there. But both teams get to veto. Like, it's not.
It makes no sense. I never want to go into a finals with the thought in my mind, oh, this team just played, they're hot. They're going to play this team that hasn't played for a day or however many hours that's like ice cold, and have that first map where you're just like, oh, team hasn't warmed up yet or whatever. Like, you have an extra week of preparation because of the delay that we had to game plan to figure out the map pool. And if you're worried about like the vetoes, like, bro, you have an entire year to be the best you can possibly be at every map. I think the way the grand final should be is play every single map in the game, see who wins more, and be like, that's the better team. Like, I don't care. Like, dude, this is something Krim was saying about London's domination of like, we had the storyline, London sucks at Dom, the 2nd worst record, I think, in the league at 9-20, whatever it is. But he was like, but they had one good map, so they were actually good at Dom. The record doesn't reflect it. I'm like, no, if they only have one good map, that means they suck at Dom because there's picking bans. You ban it, and now they're never going to win. Like, that is what being good at Call of Duty is about. You have 3 different game modes, a ton of different maps. You have to be good at as much as possible type deal. Yeah. So like if Empire won because it's best of 9 and there's extra maps, but like, yeah, they had more maps. Like the format basically made it as fluke free as possible. There's no hot hands, no one strolling in on the day of that they just happen to be frying on a Sunday. There's no, we didn't have time to prepare for this team because we had to worry about London first and Chicago first or whatever. It is, you have all the time in the world to figure out exactly what you need to do. And again, some of these teams basically had this figured out months in advance. The Chicago FaZe and Empire knew that those were the 3 teams they had to focus on. Their road was that much easier. I appreciated the week break. I mean, you could maybe adjust the best of 9 and the 1 map advance. Like, you could do some weird stuff like that. But as a whole, the more maps, the better. The more time to prepare, the better.
It's funny, right? Because we had this argument about vetoes years ago, and I've been so. I'll tell you a story. Back in Gfinity, when we were doing the Gfinity stuff, and I was working for Gfinity and obviously casting the events as well, I was obviously a big vocal proponent of saying we need vetoes. We need vetoes. Not having these random map sets is bullshit. I hate them. I always hated them. And they didn't have them in the league that year. And I got them put into the Gfinity event in London, which they kind of got in trouble for a little bit because it wasn't supposed to happen. But I had them put in, and it was great. And people would come up with these dumb arguments. They go, well, people will just ban this if they're not good at it and play all year. But the entire argument about this is you should be good at all maps, right? Because it gives you a strategic advantage to practice and get better at other maps. It gives you more flexibility tactically. It allows you to pick into what you think is a stronger map for yourself versus another team. If you willingly short pick your own map set by just trying not to practice something and, just going, oh, fuck it, we'll veto it, you're automatically going to make the game worse for yourself and harder against elite teams who have a deeper map pool. And that best of 9, and I'll be honest with you, Chance, I quite like the idea of playing all maps, although I don't know how
so
it
what
works
if heard that
from a
is an
broadcast.
extreme example, but the point is there.
I kind of like that idea. I would love as a finals. I don't hate it. I don't hate it as an idea. Realistically, it depends on how deep the map pool is. I'm not sure if Maven will ever forgive you for saying you should cast 3 DOMs. But it's one of these ones like, no, I can agree. I think map vetoes are an incredibly strategic point. If you have the higher seed and you are the better team, then sure, you probably will get a little bit of an advantage. But that advantage can very easily be negated by map pool depth and having a stronger balance overall. So it's a really interesting point as you move forward in these videos. And I do agree with some people saying, I kind of wish they were seen on broadcast a little bit more and discussed at length about it and the statistics coming forward. But that's obviously something that I'm sure will be better in the years come.
I agree. It's like we always get sent what the like pick and bans and vetoes and stuff like that are before the series, but I mean we get it maybe 45 minutes in advance, and I think occasionally we always do the due diligence of talking about here's their map records, and I think that intros the conversation of why weren't these other maps played, and occasionally it gets mentioned of this team is disgusting at Hackney Yard Dom, that's clearly going to get banned against them type deal, but they're we basically completely missed out on the storyline. I think maybe Maven and Merc mentioned at a certain point, but I don't think I ever did. Of FaZe was picking Team B towards the end. They wanted the quote unquote bad side of things where they end up picking I think they get the Dom and they get whatever the maps 2 and 4, whatever it is. No one picked Team B the entire year. FaZe wanted to, and we never even had the opportunity to really take the time to explain it. I think I also saw plenty of comments throughout the year on the subreddit Twitter of people just not understanding how it worked or why one side had the advantage towards the other. But I agree. I think from a broadcast standpoint, there's definitely some wiggle room for us to do it better, but there is a little bit of it at least.
No, I agree. All right, back to this again, the trick plays. I want to discuss them here. The locking the doors thing that Clay put out. So I kind of knew about this, but I didn't know it was because I've done it by accident. And I tried to replicate it, and I didn't understand the mechanics of it fully. I've done it in a few GBs, not realizing what I was doing. So I thought that was so interesting because you basically have to peek the door, put it the wrong way, and then just be there, and that prevents the door from being slammed open. It prevents the sprint mechanic from kicking the door in essentially, and you have to stun somebody. And that's because I've seen it in games I've played, I just didn't know how to replicate it completely. And then and obviously he tweeted it out straight away, and I was like, that makes so much sense to me. I cannot believe that it wasn't a well-known thing because obviously, apparently, it's an intended mechanic. That's supposed to be how it works.
That's the part I didn't know that it was intended. There was in the middle of the year on a Gunrunner hardpoint. I think it was a Beezy. It might have been Mac Melts, and I can't remember if they were the one locking the door or on the receiving end. But we literally watched on broadcast someone is the same thing with the Beezy with the smoke on Ramaza, but run face first in the door, couldn't get through, and they wrapped around back. And whatever player it was that had that happen, tweeted about it, and there was a brief discussion about locking doors. And then everyone forgot about it up until champs, I guess. But that's the part I didn't know. I thought it was just a glitch abuse, but apparently they had sent that to the devs or however they figured out. And I was like, nope, that's the way it's supposed to be. And I was like, I just didn't even know that. You talk about an aspect of a game and how important doors were and just not even used, I guess, properly, but that doesn't even feel right to say. It's such a strange circumstance entirely. I just don't know.
One other part of that I think people haven't picked up on as much is the fact that the team actually went and reported it as a bug. right? They could have been one of these teams who allegedly, didn't know about the map glitch or whatever, or used the map glitch. Instead, they clearly had gone through, and he said, we went through and we reported it to the devs because we didn't think it was fair. And the devs come back and said, no, you can use it. And obviously, at that point, they're like, right, that goes in the pocket.
Oh, yeah.
We're allowed to use it. It's fine, right? I think that shows a level of integrity as well, to find something that you think could be a potential advantage and to report it. And then obviously, once it's legal, you're like, right, that goes in the pocket. That's fantastic. I love that aspect of it as well. The other one was like that, you talked about that, Illy, that gunrunner, that point. I'm like, the amount of times I played gunrunner, but I've never seen that angle. Really irritated me. I was like,
Yeah.
how the hell have I never seen that angle?
And for what it's worth, there's quite a few more as well. I talked to JP about it a bit because I think it was either him or Revan like responded to the spot Illy talking about, or attached it, something like that. We're like, I never got to use my spots. There was at least a few different teams that knew different spots on Piccadilly to get the guaranteed first bloods, the spots like that Illy had. Like, we still don't know the full extent of like what the pros know for this game, and we probably never will. And actually, I think every game has had this too. Black Ops 4, I'm not here to name names because if you want them on the podcast to talk to a Bricey, but apparently in Black Ops 4, I have no evidence to back this up. There was a few teams that figured out that walls effectively don't matter for lines of sight to manipulate spawns. So there's a couple teams that were telling me of like, we need to get one player like on Seaside to stand in church and to just stare basically at the wall, like towards the back, and that will block the spawn because the game somehow reads that as like you were looking at their spawn point. Game doesn't like that, so it spawns you somewhere else. So apparently, and again, I can only say this for what I mean, and Paradox honestly might know more than I do in this regard, but there was a few teams that knew the game to such a degree that they are just abusing walls effectively in lines of sight to play the game. And like, I have no idea how much little stuff like that over the years has genuinely impacted Call of Duty, but like, that could be a podcast in and of itself of like, next time, Bryce, you could talk to some of the legends, just see what type of tricks they know. Because again, even in this game alone, there was still X number of spots, X number of little things that certain teams had an idea of, and certain teams just simply didn't have a clue, and they just keep it in the bag for when it matters most.
Oh yeah. So it's funny you bring that up because that did actually. I've had that conversation this week, and I can't remember because I've been in a couple of player discords, and I can't remember who brought it up. And at the time, now you've mentioned it again, it's brought it back. At the time, I kind of was just in the background as they were talking about it because they were talking about going back to play games on the off season. What game are we playing on the off season? And someone just said something about, I'm fucking playing that game, having to stare at walls to manipulate spawns, like a throwaway comment. And I'm sitting there, and it didn't really register until you reminded me of it just then. I'm like, oh yeah, shit, they do know about this, and it's mad for them to figure it out because obviously things like this, I think, Chance, are only going to get more prevalent. You've got coaches and analysts breaking this shit down on that kind of level, watching all the VODs and trying to figure it out. So they'll watch a VOD, see something amiss, and go into the game and try and figure out how to replicate it or break it again. And now they have dedicated teams to do that. They have people who will go and find those things for them as well as the pros. So it's going to be mad, later on. I'm sure it's going to be a dev's worst nightmare because they're going to be actively looking for it.
I'm sure quite a few teams had this. Like, I know the New York guys definitely had a couple like this. What you need to do is get Rambo Ray on the podcast, but get him drunk first and try to like dig things out of him, because the only reason I was even really expecting weird things like that to happen at Champs was like literally in the middle of the year, he was making like some random content piece for the Empire, commentating over Shotzi's gameplay on just a random scrim. And he mentioned, he like started to talk about spawn manipulation. He was like, actually, let me stop myself. I'm not trying to teach anybody, but pros, or at least certain teams, had it down to, on Gunrunner, we can't push past like the oil barrel thing over by Forest, or else like this spawn's going to happen. Like, there was quite a few teams, or maybe all of them, that were very good about, here's the exact point on the map we can stand at. Here's the exact direction we can look. If we push a little bit past this, everything's going to break and spawns like happen. And obviously with this game, it's incredibly difficult to manage all of that. You saw that the entire year, but I think Ray, I mean, again, quite a few of the guys would just be great to figure out like everything that they actually knew, because so much of this, like, I can't even talk about on broadcast without seeming like a psychopath. Like, I can't cast over Black Ops 4 and be like, hey, yo, Octane, he's looking through a wall right there. Like, he's blocking the spawn. That's why this is happening. Like, it's just going to sound insane. And obviously I might be wrong too, because it's not like I know, because like the pros are very good about keeping this sort of thing under wraps.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you there. You just learn the craziest things if you ever get into a call with them. They're just being honest about it, and yeah, I think we're gonna see more of it. It's mad to me how much we're gonna see of it going forward. I mean, because things come out years later. Like I know people like even Black Ops 2. Hailed as one of the all gold standards of competitive esports. The
Oh, are you talking about
blur
the blur glitch?
the blur glitch, and
Yeah,
nobody knew
dude.
about it at the time, right? And shit like that comes out eventually, and I'm sure in the next game people will find it. I think spawns in this game were so interesting because they were. The best way to explain it is non-intuitive, and it sounds, horrific. And don't get me wrong, in some regards it is. But it made it much harder for pros to figure shit out because chaos spawns were. I always call them chaos spawns. When a spawn happens, and it is like two on different sides of the map, and you can't figure out why at a glance, chaos spawns. They're spawning behind you, they're spawning in front of you, they're spawning to your side, and people are trying to call shit out. You're like, they're coming this way, they're coming that way. What the fuck is happening? You only really ever get to notice it properly in Codcaster. In game, you're like, I don't know what's going on. It's chaos, which is where the name comes from. This game had that because of squad spawns, and you feel like you could push something. It's like why some of the hills become unbreakable, right? Because it was just one of these ones like you basically had to and there are. That's the thing, right? While we talk about this, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm saying that pros, by and large, understand the mechanics of what they have to do to move it. And sometimes, even if they felt like they had got it, they wouldn't be certain. They're like, I just don't know if my individual play has done enough here to move this along. Like, have I done enough? I've gone past the point I need to. I've killed somebody. It's now a little bit of a crapshoot in terms of where they're going to spawn, because if there's a player in this location which I don't know, or this location I don't know, that's influencing more than my influencing. I always called it salt and burn the earth. I felt like, to get some places, you basically had to just wipe their entire team out and then just kill repeatedly and just destroy everything in the area, and then they might still spawn there. It was kind of chaos, and I think that that suffered a lot of teams early in this game. Right, and I think some of the successes of teams early in this game were due to people understanding that better, just simply because it was different, a lot different.
And like the difference is also like just because we play a new game every year, like you genuinely have to take the time to like go and figure it out. Like the biggest reason we had so many like rookies or like challengers players come in is like how many different pro teams do we have at the start of the year? We're like, I don't like this game. This is like the spawns are broken, whatever. Like I'm not gonna play it. And there was teams that legitimately like going into launch weekend had maybe like a week of practice and it skipped a month. Meanwhile, you have teams like the Empire that are playing the game before the game comes out to the point where they have S&D strats before launch day, and then they go and win every single opening tournament. Like you had enough players and enough teams that just didn't put the effort in at the start that allowed for guys like Awakening, Mac, Draza, Hollow, whoever, Spart, Vivid, like all those guys just to have that entry. Like if you play the game from the start, the amateur scene isn't quite as good as it, but the pro scene will learn what 85% of the game in the first like week.
Yeah.
They'll have all the basic strats figured out. And that's when like the next 15% or whatever it is, that's the grind. That's what takes time. That's why you have to play it every single day. So you can make all these little micro adjustments, and the pros are better than the amateur scene at that. But if the pros don't do anything at all, the amateur scene eventually is going to catch up and pass them to the point where there was a few amateur teams this year that very well could have beaten quite a few, if not, half the CDL teams on a fairly consistent basis. So like, I don't know. I guess that's a side issue, but a lot of players and teams shot themselves in the foot. And of course, now that we're dropping down to 48 starting spots or whatever it is, like not an ideal time to not put the effort in.
No, because if you're one of those lower teams, and we'll get onto this in a second, you're one of those lower teams, not really an awful lot stopping you just dumping the roster and just starting again. There's going to be a lot of talent floating about, While you're talking about DallasEmpire being great at the beginning, I think it's now time to talk about them winning the World Championship. Did win the World Championship. DallasEmpire, the inaugural season of the Call of Duty League, win the World Championship. And you know what? It was emotional. I didn't think I'd be emotional, right, watching it, because I've seen this half a dozen times. I've been at all them all. I'm still sitting there watching the interviews, going, "Oh, fucking," There's Krim going berserk. There's Clay, again talking about how ridiculous it is. I'm like, yeah, his story is mad. Shotzi, Illy, it's just all of it. Like that, it seemed like the perfect storyline team to win this chip.
No, agreed. I honestly can't even like say it better than that, right? This was again, not to name names, but I was talking to a coach on a different team that even like was telling me, they're like, you know what, like as like tough as this year was, like the Dallas Empire winning at the very end, it just like has a nice bow to it, or just like a nice like little end, the icing on top, whatever the metaphor is going to be. But like, yeah, you have all the great storylines, 3 rings for 2 different players, established GOAT for Krim, Clay, even like, dude, and think about the insanity of how professionally you have to be if you're a team of 5, and I guess a lot of teams had that, of not playing for stats, making sure that you can get the win and putting like the team above all else and making sure that you have that good finishing point, even though that like it had to have been Krim or Clay knew that one of those two was going to be gone after the year, right? Like you have the
Yeah.
3 young gods on your team. And like I think a lot of people's collective minds, like they're the future of COD or whatever. And even with knowing that and having that just amount of just insane pressure in the background to still like be able to grind and still put the effort in and still get the win, like that is genuinely impressive
Yeah,
for
I
any of the
think.
teams that were able to pull that off. Like not just Empire, like this is something that apparently, and I had no idea either, but for like a month apparently these players had that like in the background. So for all the guys that clutched up and went big, like again, just like tip the cap, hats off. Like it is genuinely impressive.
Wait a minute. How did you not know? I knew. I
You
just didn't.
actually know,
I knew like
dude.
a little while
Oh
ago,
my
and I was
god,
like, I didn't want to say anything.
dude.
Obviously,
I
I
like.
kind of alluded to it on Twitter. Like
Ugh.
I've dropped some hints, but I drop shit all the time. And I'm like, I know it's coming. I can't believe you didn't know. I knew.
Dude, like no, so like obviously I hear things all the time, but I think genuinely for any roster move, any like drama related thing, at best I found out like a day in advance before everyone else. Like I always find out right before the release, but no, I had no idea. Like I knew that 4v4 was like a talking point potential whatever, but I literally did not know until the announcement hit. And frankly, not even until like 2 hours after that because I didn't check Twitter, but like no, I had no idea. So and again, the players like yeah, whatever, we can move on, but
No, I agree.
impressive stuff, I suppose.
So you were talking about the pressure of the 4v4, right? I also think Dallas Empire put more pressure on themselves. Like, think about all the shit talking Crim's done during the year. Like he said the poster thing. We'll not forgive, we'll not forget the beef with Scump and all that going on. Like he
I'll
put
never forget
yeah.
whoever it was.
He put himself under a lot of pressure. This is his legacy, right? It is, and that's probably why we've seen such great sound bites from him talking about I am the undisputed greatest. Stop having this conversation now. Like I've done it again. Shut up. And I'm like, no, that's fair. But he put himself under pressure. Clay's got the pressure of him playing against ex-teammates, right? And the pressure of people saying he's old and washed and shit, and he got carried by that other team. Well, he beat them and won another world championship. Shotzi, come from a different game. Shotzi got, people forget this, MVP, right? But I remember a time where people were just basically spitting on his name. Like, people were just absolutely down-talking him so much.
Yeah.
Same thing with the rest of the squad, right? I think, like, Hugo and all that. It's mad to me. Mad.
I don't know. Yeah, like just that team alone, like the theory crafting that they had. And I don't know if that's like Hastro's baby, if he's the guy that wanted to implement the plan, or if he had just talked to Clay and Krim or whoever about it. But just the idea of pairing up 2 veterans and just matching them with the 3 young guns. And granted, it's not a difficult call to throw Hook on your team, but it is still a moderate risk, I think, to pick up Clay and Krim, throw them on the same team in 2020. That's at least a small risk. I would say a pretty big risk to pick up. Well, if you ask Call of Duty, like anyone from Call of Duty, they would say that's a very big risk. Every single person that I'd ever talked to that watched him play Halo was like, this is not a risk at all. He's going to be amazing. Just like, trust me. And they were very adamant about that. But like, even a buddy of mine who does some like observing and has done stuff for like the Bravo, Charlie, Delta streams, Open Challenge, whatever it's going to be. He had watched Shotzi play at like the last event of Black Ops 4, and he's like, no, he's trash. Like, he just doesn't know COD. And so everyone from Call of Duty, when Shotzi got picked up, was like, this is a big risk. We don't know how he's going to pan out. And then Ilya is also at least a partial risk of like, we know he's going to be solid. We know he's going to be respectable, but deserving to be on like the top team. He had done nothing on land to prove that. He had just turned 18. So like, it was a pretty big jump for the organization to go with that roster, and it paid off, like obviously beautifully, because they get the
Yeah.
win. But you're exactly right. Krim's pouring pressure on himself. That pays off. The org puts pressure on himself. It pays off. Just a whole host of things that it came together for him in the end.
more I think about it, the more mental that team is.
It is wild,
Like,
completely absurd.
because I know Stro was putting out things at the start of the year, and here's a hint. I have another podcast this week. I'm doing two, and Stro is coming on to talk about this.
Yeah.
He talked about building a team at the start of the year and the way he wanted to do it. Like, I can't believe this was his strategy when he come out of the gate. Because Clay was rumored to go to the Ravens. Krim had been fucking destroyed by the community, but I know Hastro really likes Krim in regards to his work ethic and before. And I remember last time around, if you go back, the old Cole EG thing where they could have gone to Envious. And he'd always regretted not just picking up who he wanted. So I think that lesson has stuck with him because they went on to form the dynasty after that. So that stuck with him. And then, he said, he called Shotzi at the start of the year. He said, yeah, we're going to take him. And I think, obviously, I will give credit to Stro there saying the Shotzi pick, he's clearly done some homework because it's a big thing to him to pick these in the inaugural year. And he's clearly gone, right, this is the guy. This is the guy he's taken. Same thing with Hugh. Hugh for me was obviously incredibly talented in a raw sense, but I didn't know how he would interact with Clay and Krim. I didn't know how that was going to work out. So for building this team, whatever strategy he employed is either like 2,000 IQ or he took a few calculated risks. Because now you talk about it, it's ridiculous in pretty much every regard.
Agreed. I think I don't know if this is the way to like cap this off as well, but like it also like in one regard sucks and the other part is entertaining that like the conversation isn't over either because like it is still theory crafting with that like pickup of a roster and still everyone is now going to be looking at his team and being like it happened online. You're all like there's always going to be all this stuff like the game plays a part of it that like it doesn't matter what they do, we're still going to go into next year and everything's going to be like nope, not good enough, like you have to do it again or else we're going to like trash you for it. So like the pressure, obviously, at least for a couple weeks or months or till the new games come out, can like be waved away. But like they still have to get back to the grind. It's never going process, or else a Chicago or Atlanta or whatever other team, the Ravens, whoever can come out and if they just dominate the next 2 years, they can be like, hey, that original strat you had sucked. It wasn't good enough. It was only for a one-off in a weird global pandemic sort of year. So they still have to like grind, but obviously like I don't even say the short term, but at least for the first year, it was I don't know if I want to use the word genius. That seems like it's too far, but an incredibly smart call.
Yeah. A lot of people say in the chat about the team picking themselves, like Hugh picking Alien Shotzi and all this sort of stuff. Like, while true, bear in mind that Stro isn't just going to go, yeah, whatever you want, mate, it's fine. Like, he's not going to just roll out. Stro was very, very active in terms of, like, building a squad. He knew he needed a frat face. He knew he needed the star power to compete. He knew he needed a competitive roster. Like, while there is a long story about the team kind of picking themselves, don't sit there and delude yourself into believing that there wasn't a good amount of judgment on the point of Hastro. Like if you could go, I want to pick up I can't even think of a random name. If he picked up someone who with a bad record or a bad attitude or whatever, or somebody who he didn't think could do it, Stro wouldn't have just bent over and gone, yeah, just pick who you want, mate. In fact, if you just want to get your mates from down the pub, that's fine. They'll play on the roster. Like, that isn't going to happen. That is a very calculated risk on behalf of Stro, who listens to his players and puts it forward. And now Rambo Ray's there. I think it'll be, Rambo Ray will obviously have an input onto the next roster or any roster changes, their subs, whatever going forward. Like, it's not, I feel like of the legacy teams, some of the legacy teams have very intelligent people in them who will pick players that fits their franchise and the movement of the game. And it should be more this year than last, because last year was a lot of the Friendship Olympics. But yeah, so I think for me, don't sit there and just go, oh, yeah, they'll pick themselves. Like, that's only a part of the story. It's true, but it's a part of the story. Like, sitting there pretending like they just walked in and just gave Stro a team list and going, yeah, these are the guys we've got. Like, that's just not going to be. But it's a risk. Like, that is a risk for Stro to put on.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would have to imagine it's like every single player they picked up, they probably agonized. Well, not agonized over the decision. Like, hey, do you want to pick up Hook? Yes. Do you want to pick up Krim? Yes. But like, as you get past like maybe 2 players, you do have to start agonizing because honestly, one of the crazier things about the league is like all these teams did have to build an entire roster without even knowing what the meta of the game was going to be, right? Like you had to make sure you picked up at minimum 1 flex player just because you don't know if it's going to be 4 AR, 1 sub, or maybe 1 gun is broken. It's a full sub meta. Like all of this was done at random. So I don't entirely buy into the narrative of like the friendship league. I know that was a tagline. I would say almost every single team handled the roster thing about as well as they could, with off the top of my head, I can think of 3 exceptions. And there might be like wiggle room to like argue about specific players and stuff like that. But I don't think for any team, like these were agonizing decisions and incredibly difficult. And just the fact that like teams are negotiating with players about to get them, and then the player the next day is like, oh, actually, I'm on this team now, and I'm like, it's paired up with these 3. Like it was chaos before the start of the inaugural season.
Well, like I said about the legacy teams having like good knowledge. There are some of the franchises, by the way, never even watched COD before they had a spot. Never even watched Call of Duty. They had to just basically go in blind and hope they got the right management, coaches, and everybody from the thing down. So this person who's just forking over money. Yeah, how much do you want? 200 grand a year. All right, we'll pay it for. No idea about the player. Obviously, like some due diligence has been done, but they don't have any specific insight into that shit. Like they just don't. They had to rely on other people who could be shysters, who could, be overblown of their own opinion. So that was kind of crazy. Kind of leads me on to our next bit, right? Obviously, it's all kind of kicking off again. The big news, the 4v4. 4v4 has come out and gone into 5v5. We're losing 12 starter slots, 12 sub spots, because apparently it's 1 sub as well.
Wait. When you say 1 sub, you mean like there's only 5 total people allowed on a team?
That's what I've heard. They're going down, and that's the bit. So I knew it was 4v4. Sub thing is unconfirmed.
So Toronto has to drop what? Literally half their roster then?
I don't know. Well, you got to have 1 sub. I don't know the maximum. I don't know if you can have more. So
okay, minimum of 1 sub. Okay, sorry.
So I knew the 4v4 thing was a lot because I had it from so many different sources. The sub thing is I'm more or less convinced that that's true, I think. No point in having 2 subs. I mean, this year subs weren't used as much. People picked up fresh. And the expansion team thing I didn't know as well, because I heard that rumor about no expansion teams, and I was like, I haven't got enough sources for this. And obviously, it's difficult for me to go digging because I'm not supposed to know some things, being in the position I'm currently am, but I just know too many people. So those 2 things, like, I didn't even allude to them, but I've heard it's only 1 sub. Which I tweeted out this morning. I went, apparently it's only 1 sub, so it's 24 people no longer in the league realistically. Although realistically, some of those spots, those sub spots, were just bullshit anyway. And those players never were going to play a day in their lives. So it's kicked off Rostermania, and there's got to be a lot of teams just absolutely stressing their balls out because they thought, oh, maybe I could make a top spot, maybe I could do this. Now they're going, your worst player, your 5th, is now gone. There's a lot. Here's the other thing, right? People haven't thought about this. Is they're going, maybe they just move him to sub. Some of these players are too good to be sub. It's like Clayster. I said this argument. Clay is too good to be a sub. So even though he's been dropped from his team, has to go on a main slot somewhere. Going somewhere.
Prime example of this is FaZe. Dude, if I'm not recommending this because I want the players in the league, but if I'm on FaZe, I'm like, I'm not dropping anyone off the main roster and giving them another team. I don't care if you think Major Maniac or Priest or whoever is the worst player. I do not want to play against them. If I have the option and it were me and I was Thanos or whatever, I would keep him on the bench. I would try to pick up all the best players and keep them on the bench and be like, I don't have to deal with them anymore. Like it was... there's some degree of relief of you going into champs knowing you don't have to play against Dashy, which obviously for whatever team on Piccadilly sucks that you had to deal with Dashy. You don't have to deal with a Gunless. You don't have to deal with Enable, no Looney. Like there was so much talent and so many good players that just weren't at champs at all this year, kept on a bench that like it had to have been very nice for certain teams and certain players. And like, again, if I'm on a team like FaZe or dude, like, again, even if I was the Empire, as much as I would want the best for Clay in his career, and the moral and ethical thing is to let him play in another team, it's like,
Yeah.
I don't want to play against you, though. I do not want to play against the pissed off Clay, who I know is going to be gunning for me next year because he just took down every single person that he played
Yeah.
against the year prior. He took them all down, right? Like, I don't want the same thing to happen to me. It's chaos. And this is actually, I don't even know. Well, I'll just throw it out there. There was, for the Opti Gaming roster, I remember talking to Mud Dog briefly, and this was very early on in the year, back when we still LAN events. We could speak to each other in person, where he was like,
Yeah.
I know we're getting to the point where I like almost certainly have to make a roster move, but who the hell do I drop off this team? Like, if I drop Dashy, he's going to get on their team and fry me. If I drop Kenny, he's going to fry me. If I drop Slasher, it's like, there's so much talent just because of how stacked the league is nowadays, that like all these teams are in such a tough spot, or at least like 10 of them, of just like, do you even want to drop your like worst player on the team? Because like they're still going to be great.
Well, I think that's the Clay situation, right? He's a restricted free agent because they know. So, and this kind of leads into the London news. So I kind of tweeted this out in a series of tweets because I kind of had to get it out there because people don't always think of the wider conversation. And that's one of the reasons I'm doing a podcast and one of the reasons I'm doing videos. So, the reason Clay's restricted free agent is because, first of all, Clay is such a fucking big brand. Like, somebody's going to take him, right? Somebody is going to take Clay as an asset, right? They've got to. So, all that money you've put into him, his buyout, all that sort of stuff from last year, you're going to want to get some money out of him because people are going to be willing to pay it.
Yeah.
Like, he is a valid sale. Like, that's why he's a restricted free agent, not just a free agent. Hashro could go, oh, yeah, I'll just drop him, good friends, all that sort of stuff. But that's not realistic in business. These are businesses. And as much as, loyalty and friendship and family and all this sort of things that these franchises say, at the end of the day, the only thing that really matters and will matter in the majority of situations is money, because they have to stay solvent and they have to make money and they have to try and get a return of investment. Clay, they've paid for Clay. Clay's won them a world championship. They love him to bits. They wouldn't let him go if they didn't have to. But now they do. That decision has been made. Okay, what do we do with him? Well, we'll sell him.
Yeah.
We'll sell him. It's 100% the case of it. And obviously, the way that this leads into the London news, actually, I'll let you kind of weigh in on that as well if you want to. I didn't want to before, because this is a long bit of a thing I have to go into.
Oh, just the London. I mean, with my understanding of the London situation is almost the same as it is for almost every team. I mean, I've never seen a single contract. I don't know. I'm sure a ton of different players have like weird things in their contract, but I think what I've heard and what players say is a lot of the contracts, it's like the 1+1 like option kind of deal, where like the players have the option of the second year to come back, and like the orgs have to, something like that. So I think basically a good chunk of the entire pro community is kind of like up in the air of like, if the teams need to drop whoever off, like they should be able to do that, not a problem. They can trade to whoever, they can keep the players on the bench. Like, I think the orgs now have, I mean, more power than teams like have ever had in Call of Duty before, and can kind of mix and match however they want. And obviously, with how much money is on the line, again, these players and teams are going to be agonizing over these decisions. So I have no idea. I don't know what the stability of the league looks like. I don't know how much of a mix and match we're going to see. I could see a ton of chaotic things looking like. We have Dashy apparently hinting at he already has a team together, which maybe is possible, maybe not. I mean, if players have known for like a month, like they're going to be game planning for stuff. The orgs obviously have their own idea. Like, who knows? I really just have not a clue.
So this bit's where it gets a little bit complicated, and I will front face this with saying that I am not a lawyer, and this is not confirmed.
This is the best conversation started. Look, I have no authority on this, but here it is.
And I have to say that because first of all, it's true, and second of all, I don't want to give false advice knowingly. So I'm not, if I'm wrong, that's fine. But I was contacted because I was tweeting about multi-year contracts, and some players, I believe, throughout the league, I mean, even heard of one in the team, people nobody's been talking about, were sold on the idea of multi-year contracts, and apparently that isn't even a thing. Like, it's not supposed to be a thing at all. It's all 1+1, which is why when I put my tweets out, I said, I've heard some of them multi-years. And this means, obviously, that they get a chance to re-up with that player again. It's just basically the same year contract again, right? And if they don't want to re-up because they want to negotiate a lower, so you can't re-up and go, I say chance, I'll say, like, I paid you $100,000 for this year, right? there's your 100K. It's a 1+1 deal. So to re-up, basically, I need to pay you 100 grand again. Well, I don't think you're worth 100 grand. I think you're worth 80 grand. So I'm not going to re-up because to re-up and to have that extra year, that is not negotiation. That is just me signing you again. So to not do that, technically, that is an end of contract and a new negotiation, right? So I believe, and this isn't, like I said, this isn't confirmed. I have to be very careful here. I believe what's happened with London is, I don't know how big the changes they are making. I don't know anything of the internal politics, but I imagine that the reason this reaction came about from Wusk and I think Scraps, and I think it's been walked back a little bit now, is probably to do with something of they want to renegotiate the contracts for those players. London, by the way, could all re-sign up back to London. All of them. Every single, and I think this will happen with a good majority of players in the league. I don't know what the salary cap is. We've had no news on that so far. If they are
renegotiating salary cap for next year,
yeah. The luxury tax is called the salary, not salary cap, but I've had no news on that. But I imagine some of these are now renegotiating on an actualized value to the franchise versus a perceived value from the start of the year. A lot of them didn't really know. So when Wusk got this news that his contract wasn't being renewed for the next year, it doesn't mean that London aren't going to sign him. They might very well do it. They're just going to negotiate another 1+1 with him. That's my understanding of it. So I think when everyone went, oh, all of London's been dropped, everybody's a thing. I think it was a little bit of maybe an overreaction or a misunderstanding from the community of what's actually happening. Because I believe that's what's happening right now. I think, and this is going to happen in more than one team, contracts are going to be, it wouldn't surprise me to see a ton of them go FA or restricted free agent and then be renegotiated back with their original team. Wouldn't surprise me in the slightest.
I mean, again, not a lawyer, and I have no idea, but it might turn into a situation where there's a couple players or a couple, I mean, I guess it would have to be a player thing that are like sort of stuck in the old way of being like, hey, I'm talented enough. Like, I'm going to get paid my due. I'm going to be able to get on a good team. And like the old school, like COD way, like that is 100% going to work. Like if you're good enough, someone is going to pick you up and try to make something happen. But there might be players now with the way they've handled themselves or something like that. There might be half the orgs in the league are just gonna be like, nope, I don't want you. I don't care if you're the best in the world. Like you're not worth it for whatever reason. We don't like your professionalism, your brand. It could be some weird, strange reason, or it could just be like, hey, you're only worth 100 grand or 80 rather than 100, whatever.
Yeah.
And there might be a ton of players or like, I'm telling you, it's just going to be strange. Like we're what? Today's Wednesday or Thursday, something like that. Champs just ended Sunday. We've already had JKap retire. Clayster got booted off the team after they won the world championships. It's now the 4v4. Like we already know 12 people are losing their jobs or getting demoted or whatever. Like we are 4 days into this offseason. We have London talking about their contracts being weird. Like it is so early on and it's already so chaotic and like who the hell knows, Brycey?
No, I agree. And that's why, like, I front-faced it. Right? I have had no information out of London. None. Yeah. This is pure conjecture on my part of me understanding roughly what's going on through. And I understand the cost cutting because, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and go, oh, yeah, they're taking money out of players' pockets. I want the money in players' pockets, admittedly, but I have said I thought the salaries last year were perhaps a tad too high from what I had heard the average was and what a lot of players were on. And I said before, I always thought 1.575 was a lot for a luxury tax. And for me, people said, oh, maybe it'll go down to 1.2 because that's 20%. I said, but it doesn't kind of weigh in with this. And if it is cost cutting, then why not go down to 1 and figure it out from there? Like it wouldn't spread. It's still very good money for everyone. You could have all 4 of your main roster on 200 grand and still have 100k left. So I don't know what's happening. I'm very curious to find it out. That's obviously more of a business question. But it is, and I suspect we're going to see a lot of it. I suspect that some of these franchises do not want to pay 200, 300 and more to players that maybe haven't performed as well this year or haven't done a lot of the brand work or haven't built themselves up to be gods in the community. Because if there's that much talent going to be there, 12 players being dropped and players like the caliber of Clay, and like you said, Atlanta FaZe, they probably don't want to spend the money to keep one of those players on the bench. Same thing with Chicago Huntsmen. It's all well saying, oh, we'll put them on the bench, but that's, a good chunk of money. And that player has to accept that position. Don't forget, right? They could just say fucking no, unless they're choosing to re-up them that +1 at the previous year's salary. Which think of this as a business decision. We'll take I don't know. Let's put a random player in. Who's currently on my timeline? We'll put Maven. he's just on my line. Maven's, he's had a good year, top team, right? This is obviously the player Maven. He is, worth. I know it's a weird thing to say, Maven, but he is worth 200k a year or whatever he is for playing in the league. A great player. Do you then waste that money to re-up his contract to lock him back in because you don't want him going somewhere else? But even though he's the worst of a top 5 team, he's still, like you said, right? Take Atlanta FaZe. Any one of those players, you don't want to play against them. But what do you do? Like, how do you make that fucking decision? Like, who am I getting rid of? Because I have to do it for business sense, unless they're all willing to take a pay cut to stay together, and one of them is willing to sit on the bench. Not going to happen.
And some teams might even evaluate, be like, hey, well, if we spend 200 grand to keep a player on the bench, like that boosts our odds X amount to like go and win champs and make the money to make the investment. Like, again, I just like almost want to take the back seat on this just because every single team is going to have their own particular set of goals, how much they want to spend, what they can afford, the players they want, who they can actually get to attach themselves to. Like every single team, it's going to be such a particular nuanced thing. And there's just so much behind the scenes that we're never going to be privy to.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's just impossible to comment with any sort of not authority, but like effective, like knowledge base behind it.
Yeah.
It's just random, or not random, but it's chaotic. And like, it might even be a thing where like, I don't know, some team has a stats wizard that is able to figure out the actual value of a player. Be like, nope, Crim6 is worth $247,356 and not a penny more because he has this amount of kills. He'll like all of it. Like, who knows how advanced some of these teams are going to get, but
Moneyball.
I guess that's just what the league is now, right? It's right now, year one, the 3 teams that did it the best were FaZe, Chicago, and Dallas, I guess in reverse order, whatever. And that's like the starting points. Now everyone else has to go back to the drawing board, figure it out, and like we have an official evaluation year over year of what are the best strategies in like Call of Duty.
Yeah.
And it's just going to take time for everyone to figure all this out.
I mean, it's just mad to think about. I don't envy the franchises trying to work this out. Because, I mean, like you said, dropping a big player, never going to be a good thing. Dallas, haven't come out smelling a rose of it dropping Clay because people are fanatic Clay fans. Even if they're doing it, all the best intentions have to do it, all that sort of stuff. We dropped him early so he can get another team. All this sort of stuff, right? They've done it right. They've done all this. And yet still people are like, how could you do this to Clay? And I'm like, well, it's business. It sucks for Clay. It sucks for Clay. But I understand. And it's the same thing with this 4v4, right? I don't want to... This is a difficult one to bring up because going to 4v4, I believe, is necessary. Every business in the world has suffered from the pandemic. Well, not every business. Some of them just made billions, but we're not going to talk about capitalism right now. It's a tough time with return of investments, with the COVID, affecting revenue streams and all this sort of stuff. Obviously, 4v4 looks like a cost-cutting method. The silver side is that the silver lining is kind of want 4v4. That's the benefit, is that out of all this misery, with players losing spots, money going down, the emotions that have been running high from, even like Krim said, he put out a blasting tweet about it. At least in this horrible situation for cost cutting, that looks like it has to be done to, increase the viability of these teams, because they are businesses. The franchises, as much as they, their social media will talk about loving Call of Duty and the atmosphere and the intensity of winning and all that sort of stuff. Sorry, they're businesses. They're run by businessmen. Right, I don't think there's a billionaire in the league who's doing it because he loves Call of Duty. Right, I haven't heard of one that's done it like that. Right, people are investing into these things. You'd have to. It's like it'd probably be me or Chance if we won. 400 million, we'd probably have a crack at a franchise and we would love it, and it'd be less of a thing. But this is not the case. This is more. We have to make this return on investment, or we go under. People then lose their jobs completely on the back end. But it's something that realistically has to happen. At least the cost cutting benefits us in the fact that we get 4v4. No expansion teams suck, but I didn't expect expansion teams after this year because of the pandemic.
I don't know. I I, the positive spin I have on this is like obviously 9 out of 10 things that happen with 4v4 are positive. The one major negative is like it is going to negatively impact people's lives. And maybe there's potential things that can be done to mitigate it if teams end up having like an academy team that they throw into challengers and like salary them. Like there's potentials for it to like not be a terrible type deal. But initially, yes, 12 starting spots are going to be gone. That does suck. But I will say, I actually appreciate the community reaction to it. Like it's not like everyone like held hands saying kumbaya and were like sweet 4v4, let's move on. Like it seemed like a ton of people on Twitter, a ton of people in the center blew up and they were like, hey, like everyone took the time to acknowledge like this actually does suck for the players, for Clay especially because of the 3-time world champ just gets dropped. But I at least appreciate the acknowledgement of the negative.
Yeah.
I just think that's nice at least. Which
yeah,
I don't know, what am I, a kindergarten school teacher, but whatever.
It's what a friend of mine from DeSoto actually would say is a shit Sarnia, right? There are good sides, but there's also that feeling it is shit. And it is going to suck. And I'm hoping these people find something. Challenges, I hope Challenges changes. I've got a whole thing. I've got a document, by the way, for a future video of mine about Challenges, about how the impact of it. And we won't go into it now, right? We're going to do questions from the chat because I don't want to spend another hour talking about Challenges. It's a whole mess of infrastructure and business side of it, and it's crazy, right? That's what I think pisses me off about hot takes in the community. And one of the reasons why I don't always tweet out my hot takes, right? Chance, you know for a fact, right? You yourself very well versed in the inner workings of Call of Duty. You know your shit. You have an educated opinion. It's difficult even knowing everything that we know just to put out an opinion on Twitter because in that amount of characters, you leave out context, you leave out so much crap. So when I see hot takes from people who don't know stuff, it irritates the shit out of me. Irritates the shit out of me because to put something so deep and wide in a box like that is just detrimental for everybody. Stop putting your shit on Reddit. Stop it. Just fucking pack it in. All right, some of you. You need it. You need to fucking calm down. Stop tweeting some people with your shit takes because it doesn't help anybody. Don't have a go at people when you don't know what you're talking about. Like I mean, I do it, but you know, I've put it at least in longer form context, so there's an hour of me talking shit. But I'm willing to take that bullet for you. But I don't know. Anyway, questions from the chat. Let's see what people have got coming in. Brilliant. First question: how do we think 4v4 will impact Challenges? I think Challenges is going to be crazy, right? In terms of the amount of talent in there, and I worry about the pros' reaction to it in terms of dropping out of the Golden League and those wonderful paychecks and it's a mental toll. I think it's a mental toll. Charles, I don't know what your thing is. Seeing some of these big names drop into Challenges.
I mean, the initial reaction is just from like the pure competitive side of like, dude, that competition is going to be insane. Like again, outside of the Australia region, like it's already super competitive. NA, like there's a couple teams that were more cream of the crop towards the top, but now like we already had enough teams from both EU and NA that very well would have and could have been competitive in the league. Yeah. Like you don't even have to add extra pros that were already in or like slip one guy in. I mean, as a full 5-man roster, the talent was there. Now you're adding talent to that pool. And again, this just makes the road, the path to be a pro even more difficult, even more prestigious. It makes just making money potentially that much more difficult. Yeah. Like I know the teams that were at the very top ended up making a decent chunk of change. I think there was more money put into challengers than any other year, potentially in any other esport, but I don't know how quickly there's a fall off sort of this thing. So now if you have extra teams, if it like ends up getting more spread thin towards the top, like it is going to be very difficult in, you know, hopefully the game is going to be great and that could be a saving grace. But like we already saw this year, X number of players that have retired. It is stressful times and it is not easy in the slightest to be a competitive Call of Duty player. So if anything, again, it just kicks it up a notch, makes it that much more difficult.
Yeah, it really does. I can't disagree with anything you said there. All right, this one's a bit of a tough one, and we'll kind of shoot from the hip. What do you do with Chicago?
I think everyone's instinct is to drop Pristini. I would say Scump and Formal, you too
much of a brand. Drop. Just even outside of gameplay, too much of a brand.
And then Envoy you can't drop either. So I think there's your core 3, and with those you have 2 subs, 1 AR. Maybe look for a flex. And honestly, you could keep either Twin in that situation. I still think I don't know exactly when or how these decisions to be made. I don't know if the salary cap is going to be adjusting to it, but I think for quite a few of the teams, especially those at the top, wait till the new game comes out and just trial the players and see what works best. And just like a lot of these teams could just keep everybody. Like if I'm Chicago, I don't necessarily want to get rid of anyone on that team because they might have the potential to be great. It's like Bristini wasn't on this team till halfway like through the year,
Yeah.
ends up replacing Gunless. I think Gunless toe to toe, at least at different times over the past couple of years, has been the better player. Doesn't mean he's the better fit for the team. So like I wouldn't want to get rid of Preston if Preston is better at running the sub, even though he's great with the AR. If it turns out the game is going to be a 3 sub meta or whatever it's going to be, like I think you need to take the time. And of course, you have to look at other options as well, depending on what free agents. But like, dude, every single one of these roster questions, Brycey, it's going to come down to just like, who knows? Because free agents are available. Like, it's just, it's going to be chaos, right?
It is. It is. And obviously, you know, you're right. We don't have some of the variables. We don't know what the luxury tax is doing. So it's difficult for us to quantify that one. So that's why I said we'll just do it. We'll touch on it quickly before going into it. Oh, this is a great one, Chads. Did you get fined for the F-bomb?
No, I didn't.
Get an email.
As far as I know, there's no language in anyone's contract that has anything to do with fine. Like for casters, at least, I think there's a threshold where instead of fined, you just get fired. And if you cross that line, like you're just gone. It's not like, hey, pay $2,000 or whatever it is. It's just like you're gone. Like that was way too far. You had a nice run, and that's the end of it. But no, I did not.
You get a message or an email come in.
I've unfortunately cursed more than once on broadcast before. I'll get like cheeky comments from whomever at Activision and just like, hey, you know, like maybe don't do that live on broadcast type deal, but never to the point of like threats or whatever. And I will say one of the most difficult parts about casting from home is it's easy when you're at an event to make the mental switch of like turn on professional mode. I'm catching myself and stopping myself from cursing so much while on broadcast from home because I'm used to playing COD. And Bryce, I'm sure you've had this too. You get a little bit angry when you play. You might say a bad word or two, and like I'm sitting in the same chair. It's the same monitor. Like I'm used to being able to, you know.
It's more relaxed. More flippant. Like, I mean, first of all, right, we're human, and obviously as adults we swear, and swear words are by and large great. It's a great part of my vocabulary. Love them. I have mixed feelings on this. Obviously, it needs to be professional, but I think it's such an old way of thinking. It's an 18+ game. We're adults. I understand for kids you're not supposed to, but I even have this thing where I don't think, you know, like it's a describing word. Like obviously it has a vulgar context, but it's not in of itself vulgar in, you know, that sort of way. Like it's not damage. And it's just a long thought about my thoughts on language itself. It's such a common part of it in any adult conversation. Nobody would blink an eye. Suddenly it becomes taboo when you walk into an office, even though if you go with those same people to an office to a pub, perfectly acceptable again. It's maddening to me, and I hate it.
And I will say the Brits generally are much more progressive on the language thing than Americans, but like for every single tweet I got, everybody's just like, like you said the thing, you shouldn't have done that. But no one's like, you need to get fired. I don't want this on broadcast. My children watch this. Like everyone, including the other casters, talent, Activision fans, whoever, like everyone had a mature response of just like, like you did the thing, but not, you know, it wasn't overblown, no massive overreaction. So I'm not happy with the fact that I said it, but I appreciate, you know, they didn't fire me on the spot, which was nice.
I said they should have given you a promotion. I've got in trouble more, by the way, for things I've said off camera than I have on camera.
That's gotta be true, actually. 100%.
I have said things in green rooms with people who looked at me and gone, "What did you just say?" And I'm like, that's a normal thing. It's just because you're Americans. Americans have a terrible time with this. I think it's the C word that gets me in trouble more than anything, because Americans not normal over there. Where especially in Essex,
dude, we're coming around to it, dude. We're getting more used to it. We're slow paced with certain things.
Australians are even more progressive than I am with it. But for me, it's a term of endearment for a lot of people. Obviously, it's a vulgar term, but it doesn't. I don't mean it in that context. Anyway. Lord Brinton says, "Chance I missed my main AR looking over my shoulder. Please come home." I'm guessing you've got a GB to go to.
No, not GB. We just play together. I've actually, dude, I forgot how fun competitive Call of Duty can be. I started playing World War II GBs, like Black Ops 4 League play, stuff like that the past few days, and like I've been having a great time. It's been nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. People are saying they think that maybe the twins are a package deal. You know, maybe they leave together.
Well, okay, they already didn't team with each other at the start of this year, so in no
Came
way,
back
shape, or
together.
form
It's
do I
like
think.
magnets.
But at the same time, if they've already shown that willingness to split, in my mind, there's no way they're a package deal. Like they might like try to push it, but there's no way either one of those players is going to say 100%. If this guy's not playing on my team, I'm not playing. Like I really doubt either one of those guys says that. Even if they want to be on the same team, which is fine. Like you can do whatever you want, but
yeah, I can see that. All right, let's take a last question. Shockwaves, bro. Last question, and I'll let Chance, get back to what he was doing. I don't know what you do in the off season, Chance. I've always imagined you just in a string vest in the woods somewhere. That's my entire thing. Growing the hair out and don't shave until you come back. Let's talk about this. Given how many roster changes were made this year, usually an AM instead of an existing sub, will teams prep for this and maybe put more thoughts into their subs next season? Good question. The question is, I fucking hope so. Because I thought the sub situation this year was disgraceful, and I've gone on record saying this before. I think some of the franchises should be ashamed of themselves. Rather than using their subs or planning for subs in a realistic fashion, they just kind of went, bollocks to it. Some teams didn't do that, but I think a good few teams did, and I hated it. And it showed. It showed when you guys sucked and didn't have anyone to replace you, and I'm glad you fucking sucked.
Well, so this goes back to it might just be tough to evaluate, right? Like if you're working with $1 million for the salary cap or whatever the hypothetical is going to be, do you want to stack the full 5-man roster and hope for the best and like leave the subs as you're not expecting them to play? And then if you need to pick up someone through the year, hope you can get a trade in. Like it's complicated enough that I think all the teams are going to attempt to learn from it, and certainly some of the teams need to do a better job of it. But it's very tough to call of like how good of a player do you want on the bench, or do you hope you can make a trade, or do you hope that there's going to be enough talent even in the challenger circuit that you can use your alternate team for whatever. Like I still think one of the best things that you could do with like the setup that we have is pick up a bunch of S&D stars and have that be your scrim partner. You pay them the bare minimum and say, hey, you're going to play in every single online tournament possible. You need to hit these X amount of S&D games you play per week to keep yourself fresh. And you get bonuses for whatever to keep those guys motivated and have that be your S&D scrim partner. Just even something simple like that, I think could be massively beneficial to a team.
Yeah, no, I agree, because I mean, think of the value of that is that you keep your strat secret. You could even incentivize that team to. I mean, you may not even have to pick them up into your sub spots. You could just say to a team and have an agreement with them. We're going to play you an S&D. Every time you beat us, we'll give you cash.
Sure.
Right? We will incentivize beating us because we want you to be as good as you can be, because we need to get better at search. And you can have that with a couple of teams. Basically playing glorified wages, except it's a training tool. It's a really good idea, to be fair. But I think subs should be taken more secret here. I think if I'm being honest, any one worth its salt will be going towards looking at good AMs, saying, hey, let's put him on a sub bench, take a risk. Because you could do, if you have 2 subs like this year, what they should have done is picked up a viable veteran that they can try out and put in if they have the worst case scenario. There are good veterans, middle of the pack veterans, lower end veterans who can just sit in that spot, go play in challenges, and if you need them, they're not going to shit the bed if someone gets ill or something. And then you can have an AM where you go, right, we need a major roster change. We either put in this vet or we put in this AM we haven't trialed as much, who looks shit hot, but we don't know how he plays at the pro level. That's a viable strategy for me. It's 2 different options: speed, AR, whatever you need. Get it.
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning just sort of generically, like the subs this past year was just weird because like they were sort of in like purgatory where they like couldn't play in challengers, or at least like 1 or 2 of them couldn't play in challengers, but the rest could, or whatever like that was. And I think I'm pretty sure I've seen comments about like that being adjusted for the future.
Yes,
so like I think yeah, generically, whether or not your criticism, Brycey, is on specific teams or the league or whatever, I think there's enough adjustments being made that as a collective, the sub spots are just going to be utilized in a better form, whether that's for the weird S&D stuff, the weird strats, for the generic fill-in players, or whatever it's going to be. Like there should be a discernible sense of like improvement in that regard.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think that'll be everything from now. Chance, thank you so much for coming on, man. Like, if anything, this should just be your podcast. I'll rename it for like the next week. You're too good, man. Like, you're too good. So I appreciate it, man. I know it was short notice. I was kind of up in the air about whether to do another one day, but I really wanted to talk about stuff. So appreciate it. Any last words for the stream, everybody watching and stuff?
No, I appreciate you having me on. It's always a pleasure to talk with you, Brycey, and you're too kind. You gotta be meaner to me, honestly. It's a little bit weird.
Chance, that's the thing. You know that I'm a mean guy to a lot of people, but as far as I'm concerned, you've just done nothing but greatness since you've come on. So
I appreciate that, man.
That's awesome. All right, to everybody watching and listening right now on Spotify and YouTube and stuff, appreciate the feedback on YouTube and everything. Spotify as well. So many of you are downloading this on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Awesome. If you go to my YouTube channel, subscribe and shit, that would be great. Get on the Spotify as well. I am trying to build this up again. You know, it took me 2 years last time, but I'll keep on cracking. Appreciate everybody. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.